What if I told you that the dread you see in your opponent's eyes is entirely due to the God who walks beside you? What if the reason people flee isn't because you're a danger, but because you're the live, breathing punishment for their secret sins? You, chosen one, are a spiritual nuclear reactor whose sheer existence is triggering a meltdown in the evil world. They believe they could toy with you, but now they realize they have angered the very force that keeps the cosmos together. In this video, we will not only discuss your strength, but also the anatomy of the horror you inadvertently instill in the minds of your rivals. We shall explain why a cured, divinely backed believer is the most powerful force on the globe, capable of making hell quake. This is not a lecture for the faint-hearted. This is a revelation to the selected. Let's get to it. Hashtag number 1. When you choose accountability over victimhood, you become a weapon. This is the fundamental reality, the seismic change that has altered your spiritual DNA. Everything changed when you stopped thinking yourself as a victim of your circumstances and began to perceive your life as a divine purpose. When you were a victim, your enemies, critics, and spiritual vampires were content to feed off of your sorrow. Your tears were their confirmation. Your anguish was the coin with which they purchased a feeling of superiority. They might use sympathy to dominate you, influence you with your own past, and keep you stuck in a flawed narrative. But then you did something inconceivable. You stopped repeating your pain for sympathy and instead studied it like a battle plan. You followed every wound back to its source, not to reopen it, but to learn the enemy's methods. You probed every grief, not to wallow in sadness, but to extract the heavenly lesson hidden inside the anguish. You gazed at each betrayal, not to carry resentment, but to see a mirror of your own weaknesses and the places where God was calling you to strengthen your faith. This is when you became scary to them. You took back your authority. The you who required their approval to be complete, that you have died. Are you the one who desired vengeance in order to feel justified? That you were crucified beside Christ. You grasped a deep spiritual principle. Suffering was never intended to be a permanent habitation. It was a doorway. It was the hallowed ground on which God would construct your testimony. When you stopped blaming and began to create, you reflected on every person around you who was still comfortable with their brokenness. Your recovery became an indictment of their failure to heal. Your progress shed light on their stagnation. You didn't have to say anything. Your entire presence became a sermon. It yelled, "Healing is possible. Freedom is available." In a culture hooked to drama, disorder, and the alluring chaos of emotional distress, that message is a declaration of war. They are running away from you today, not because they are afraid of what you will do to them, but because they are afraid of what you represent. You symbolize the route less traveled, the path of discipline, the arduous yet rewarding journey of forgiveness and spiritual progress. You are no longer an object of their sympathy. You are a disruptor of their familiar rhythms. And that type of supernatural presence doesn't simply change the environment. It destroys it. You are not a threat because you are loud or aggressive. You are dangerous because you are alert. And the version of you they could gaslight, guilt trip, and whisper about in the corner, that version will never be available again. This new creature, this fighter of light, walks in such a powerful truth that it scatters the darkness. Hashtag number 2. Your spiritual purity is a threat to their demonic bonds. Your own energy, the spiritual frequency you now radiate, is so clean that it works as an instant and potent irritation to any sort of spiritual pollution. You do not need to say a single word of reprimand. Your presence is a reprimand. Your aura is a sermon. Your light is the judgment. You carry a frequency that naturally and without effort distinguishes the genuine from the artificial, the consecrated from the corrupt, and the humble spirit from the concealed, festering ego. When you enter a room, there is a perceptible change. Individuals who were previously comfortable in their masks of deception and pretend become anxious. They can't get their footing around you. A spiritual uneasiness arises when your spirit, linked with the Holy Spirit, sees through the veneer and right into the core of their intents. You are not attempting to reveal them. The Spirit of God inside you does it for you. This is the intrinsic character of purity. Just existing destroys impurities. A single drop of clean water in a vessel of oil will always stay separate. You do not have to get into debates or confrontations. Their own anxiety becomes proof of their spiritual status. They will transfer their discomfort onto you, characterizing you as too intense, too much, or judgmental. However, they are unable to sustain their self-deception in your company. Your aura serves as a heavenly mirror that they did not want, and when they get a peek of their actual reflection in your light, it is often a gruesome and unpleasant vision. People who hide behind pretense are inherently threatened by naked, unvarnished sincerity, and your energy, sanctified by the fire of your sufferings and the anointing of God, is profoundly and irreversibly genuine. This is why friendships die without a single fight. This is why those who have harmed you will go to tremendous measures to avoid you, even if you have never questioned them about their actions. Your efforts will prevent them from resting in the illusory tranquility of unconfessed sin. It develops into a chronic spiritual itch that people are unable to scratch. That is the crux of the matter. Your development not only inspired but also infuriated them. It unsettled every aspect of their being that had before chosen the comfort of the known over the bravery of the unknown. Your change serves as a continual, nagging reminder that they were given the same opportunities, the same 24 hours in the day, and equal access to God's grace. They had their own suffering and tragedies, but they chose a different decision. Instead of accepting responsibility for their own spiritual stagnation, they have channeled their hatred against you. You did not enter their life to compete. You arrived as a catalyst for change. But your growth served as a heavenly mirror for the parts of themselves that they believed didn't exist, the portions that badly needed healing and deliverance. The envy did not begin when you began winning. It began when you refused to be buried in the grave they had prepared for you. They believed they had left you for dead in the tomb of your trauma. They honestly felt that you would never rise again. But when you did, and you emerged not with bitterness but with grace, not with a craving for vengeance, but with a heart full of forgiveness, something within them snapped. Because your mere existence became incontrovertible confirmation of a fact they have been frantically attempting to deny, that they, too, might have improved. They, too, might have chosen to heal. They, too, may have risen from their ashes. So they assault the mirror. They smear your name. They gossip behind your back. They ridicule your religion. They do this not because of anything you have done to them, but because it is far simpler to hurl stones at a mirror than to stare into it and deal with the person gazing back. They are not upset with you. They are outraged by the discovery you represent. Your tranquility emphasizes their disarray. Your attention reveals their diversions. Your accomplishment sheds insight on the spiritual shortcuts they attempted but were unsuccessful. And the raw, unfiltered reality is intolerable for a person still completely in denial. But here's what they don't comprehend. You are not a mirror made of delicate glass. You cannot be broken by their darkness, slander, or purposeful quiet. You were created from the unshakable substance of divine truth. You have been tempered by the flames of resilience. Almighty God is holding you together with His very hand. And no matter how hard they attempt to deny the truth you reveal, they will continue to see it because your life has become a living epistle, a message from God to them. And the lesson is straightforward. Either rise to the occasion or remain angry about those who did. #####. Number 5. You don't need revenge because your life has become it. There came a time in your path when you decided to cease wasting valuable spiritual energy on the meaningless quest of vengeance. You stopped attempting to establish your value to those who were determined to misunderstand you. You ceased seeking revenge on those who had caused your temporary demise. Instead, you made a smart, deliberate choice to focus all of that energy inside. You concentrated on your healing, progress, and forward movement with God. And in doing so, your mere life became the most powerful and indisputable kind of retribution. It became live, breathing proof that every demonic effort to break, mute, or destroy you had failed magnificently. They attempted to damage your reputation. They made up falsehoods, spread vicious talk, and influenced people against you. They even exploited your history in an attempt to humiliate you into submission. But nothing stuck. None of it lasted. And now they must sit on the sidelines and watch in shocked bewilderment as you become everything they said you would never be. That is the storyline surprise they did not see coming. They expected you to lose your mind. They were counting on you to react, self-destruct, and become so filled with rage that you would perform their work for them. But you picked a greater route. You opted to be aligned with God rather than angry at your opponents. You opted to exercise your faith rather than exact your retribution. And while they were busy scheming your demise in their hidden covens, you were quietly rising in the Most High's secret location. That modest, unassuming growth, that obvious spiritual glow-up, that is what plagues them today. Because you didn't simply survive their attack, you transformed into a version of yourself they never imagined you had the courage or the fortitude to be. You are not petty. You are a prophet. You didn't answer fire with fire. You took a step back and enabled God to change the script in ways that no human act of vengeance could ever match. And now, every time they see you smiling, prospering, or strolling in a serenity beyond all comprehension, it burns them. It is a spiritual fire that consumes them, not because you are attempting to bring them misery, but because you are no longer in suffering as a result of their actions. That is the true power. They cannot touch the tranquility, blessings that they cannot prevent, a heavenly favor that they can't explain. And the most hazardous aspect of it all, you never became like them. You didn't let their treachery turn you resentful. You did not let their hatred to transform you into a hateful person. You carefully guarded your emotions and kept your spirit pure. You let your character speak louder than your grief. And that kind of spiritual discipline, that degree of grace under fire, is a rare and valuable commodity. It's wonderful, and it is utterly fatal to someone who had planned to destroy you. You became the one thing they dreaded the most, live evidence that God really does arrange a table for you in front of your adversaries. And every meal you have at that table, every mouthful you take in peace, is a resounding proclamation of your triumph, much more powerful than any words of vengeance. ############################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################### This knowledge is the ultimate game changer. You took away all of their power when you realized they never had any genuine power in the first place. They were not powerful. You were just brainwashed to think they were. The manipulation, intimidation, guilt-tripping, and silent treatments were not indicative of true strength. They were borrowed authority techniques, a house of cards constructed on the unstable basis of your own doubts. The only reason their hold seemed so tight was that you hadn't yet fully realized who you are in Christ. But as the cloud of deceit lifted and the light of God's truth shone through the darkness of their falsehoods, the whole game changed. You stopped asking for their approval. You stopped walking on eggshells, carefully negotiating their emotional minefields. You stopped wasting your valuable energy on individuals who only felt strong when you felt tiny. And the instant you accomplished it, they started to disintegrate, not in a corporeal, but in a spiritual sense. Their weapons of control were no longer effective. Their ideas no longer serve as the foundation of your identity. Their condemnation no longer kept you prisoner for restless evenings. That's when the true war was won, because the authority they possessed was not theirs in the first place. It was always yours. They were only abusing your lack of knowledge. They simply seemed tall because you were kneeling. And when you eventually stood up, emotionally, spiritually, and psychologically, they couldn't take the change in perspective. The version of you that they could control, the one that catered to their every desire, no longer existed. You have grown into someone who thinks like Christ, acts with heavenly purpose, and defends their peace with the zeal of a lioness protecting her young. That type of spiritual development is scary for those whose whole sense of self was built on your frailty. And what makes you absolutely, unquestionably dangerous right now is the clarity with which you move. You can see through the games. You may sense the slightest changes in energy. Manipulation is obvious from a distance. You are no longer reacting from unresolved trauma, but rather from hard-won insight. You've gone to hell and back, and you didn't just get it out alive. You documented the experience. You recovered. You returned with a heavenly plan. That type of revelation leaves you unshakable. They're now unsure how to approach you. Their traditional approaches are ineffective. The triggers that they used to pull no longer work. They throw arrows of humiliation, which fall harmlessly at your feet. What about the terrible, dismal truth? They really believed you would be under their grasp forever. But now you come into places with a calm, unassuming strength that shatters their whole facade. Because the ultimate reality is that they were only powerful when you didn't realize you were selected. Number 7. You are not only intelligent, you are intuitively invasive. Your intellect extends beyond reasoning, facts, and spoken words. You have advanced to a higher degree of knowledge. You are inherently intrusive. You can detect what others are attempting to conceal. You sense the intensity behind their remarks. You see the stark contrast between what their tongue says and what their soul screams. While others are easily distracted by outward looks, you notice the subtle, almost imperceptible cues, the unexpected, pregnant pause in their speech, the wobbly, brief eye contact, the tone of voice that is utterly out of sync with the grin on their face. You can see through stuff. And this makes people very uneasy, particularly those who have become masters of deception and have gotten used to getting away with it. People will accuse you of overthinking, but they do not understand the reality. You are not obsessive, you are just watching. You are not filled with worry, you are intensely aware. Your mind is not out of control. Rather, it is continually scanning, reading, decoding, and interpreting the spiritual environment around you. And you don't need anyone's confession since you already knew the truth the instant they changed their attitude. This is what makes you such a threat to manipulators, liars, and pretenders. Long before the thunder rolls, you sense the spiritual storm. Before a single word is uttered, you can feel what is wrong or out of place in a room. This isn't paranoia. This is prophetic insight. You've tapped in. Your intuition is like a heavenly Wi-Fi signal that is always connected and downloading information from God's throne chamber. As a result, persons who engage in deception are unable to remain in your company for long. It's not that you reveal them via your words. Your knowing causes a real pain that they are unable to ignore. You compel them to face the things they hoped no one would notice. The fact is that some individuals will despise you for this same reason. They will be angry with you for discovering what they attempted to hide. They will be unhappy with you for seeing the underlying message in what they mistook for a joke. They will loathe you for asking the one sharp question that cuts through their carefully crafted facade. You're not on a mission to destroy anybody. You simply cannot unsee what you have been divinely blessed to see. And it is what makes you a danger to everything false while also being a friend to everything real. You are not loud, yet your soul makes a thunderous scream. You don't attempt to dominate anybody, yet your knowledge alone disarms them. You do not belong in shallow, superficial circles since you swim in the deep seas of the spirit. And that depth, intuitive sharpness, is more than simply intellect. It is divine surveillance. Number 8. You are spiritually expensive, and they can no longer afford you. This truth will set many of you free. You're spiritually pricey. They can no longer afford to be in your presence. You charge too much. You are really too expensive. You pay too much for energy. You charge too much for responsibility. And this isn't because you expect anything from them. It is because your very existence requires it. Being in your circle now entails showing up with integrity. It involves removing the masks. It entails becoming honest with yourself and with God. It entails undertaking the difficult, sometimes painful, task of spiritual development. People who feed on appearances, manipulate emotions, and base their life on half-truths are simply unwilling to pay that price. You aren't the issue. Yes, they are. But admitting that would need a long, hard look in the mirror, and most people would rather abandon a spiritual connection than level up to fulfill its standards. You do not let them stay on the surface. Your vibe goes deep. It shouts things out without saying a word. You are the kind of person that can go into a room and entirely change the vibe, not because you are loud or noisy, but because you are in sync. When individuals are out of line with themselves, they experience extreme discomfort. They will label you as too deep, too serious, or too intense, because those labels are much easier to swallow than saying, "Your presence makes me realize how fake I have been living." They will call you intimidating, but what they really mean is that their own reflection, illuminated by your light, is shaking them to their core. You awaken their consciousness not because you intend to, but because your soul refuses to make room for the falsehoods that have become a way of life for them. And here's the irony. The same people who previously frantically longed to connect with your light may come to detest you once they see it has to be transformed. They assumed your glow was just something to revel in, a free source of warmth and vitality. They were unaware that it came with a spiritual weight, a heavenly obligation, and a degree of sincerity that they were not yet prepared to bear. You're not draining, you're detoxifying. Your presence serves as a spiritual purgative, removing all that does not belong. And those who are unable to confront what comes out will undoubtedly portray you as the problem, in order to avoid paying the spiritual cost of your relationship. Because the reality is, you don't just cost too much to be with. You're too expensive to lay around. And anybody who is involved in sustaining their illusions cannot afford to face the reality that you hold inside yourself. Hashtag number 9. You do not need validation. You are the evidence. You've finally arrived at the point when you no longer expect a round of applause. You've stopped looking for others to understand you, agree with you, or validate your purpose. Because you have come to the profound and irreversible insight that their view of you was never the source of your power. You were verified at the secret location during peaceful periods when no one else was looking. Nobody witnessed the tears you shed, the prayers you mumbled in the middle of the night, the lonely breakdowns, or the solo fights you won. You gained your power via stillness. And that type of power does not call for public attention. You now know who you are, which makes you very dangerous. That wisdom did not come from the approval of a multitude. It was created in the blazing furnace of anguish. It arose at times in your life when you had nothing and no one to rely on except God and your own tenacious will to persevere. That's what changed you. That's what made you unshakable. So you don't move to impress. You move with purpose. And that enrages those who formerly had the authority to determine your self-worth. Manipulators, narcissists, and control freaks cannot tolerate someone who no longer need their approval. They loosen their grasp the instant you cease reducing yourself for their comfort. You became everything they thought you would never be: self-aware, validated, and unstoppable. Because the moment you recognized you didn't need their platform, validation, or approval to be the person God intended you to be, you became a free agent of divine purpose. And free people are the most difficult to manage. You are the proof. You are living evidence that heavenly favor is not determined by the number of followers, the level of acclaim, or your social standing. It is constructed in the dark, tested by fire, and unveiled in the light. Your life may now speak for itself. Your very existence serves as evidence. Even when people attempt to deny it, talk about it, or pretend not to notice it, they feel it. They understand that you are no longer chasing chances. You are the opportunity. You no longer need permission. You are the confirmation. And what irritates them the most is the indisputable fact that you created this new life without them. You were underestimated, discarded, and ridiculed. And now you are unmistakable. You did not only quiet their skepticism, you transformed yourself into live evidence that their doubt was a falsehood from the start. Final call to action asterisk. We are reaching the conclusion of this broadcast, yet the revelation has only begun. What you heard tonight is more than simply a message. It is a command. It is a call to embrace your God-given identity. If this word has lit a fire in your heart, I encourage you not to keep it to yourself. First, if you haven't already subscribed to God Connection, do so right now. This is more than just a channel. It is a spiritual armory for God's end-time army. Hit the subscribe button and the notification bell to ensure that you never miss what your soul has been waiting to hear. Second, let us start a wildfire of testimony in the comments area. Leave a comment below and tell us which of these points struck you the most. Your testimony might be the thing that motivates another fighter to keep fighting. Third, please share this video. You know someone who has been neglected, underrated, or is rising silently. Send it to them. Let them know they are not alone and that they have more power than they think. Finally, please remember the opportunity to collaborate with us via the Super Thanks button. Your $10 donation allows us to continue spreading these facts to a world that desperately needs them. This is more than just material. This is a confirmation. Subscribe, like, comment, share, donate. The message doesn't end here. It multiplies. Until next time, walk with complete authority of who you are. You are not just a selected one. You're a weapon.